blending brains is the best for this process. I've used a fork, I've used a little like hand crank egg beater. I don't have electricity, so that's what I use. But a blender is ideal. And so I use approximately 1.5 gallons of water, 1 1/4 deer brains, or you could supplement, say I've often done, if I have 1 deer brain, I don't want to bust into another one, I'll use 1 brain and like 3 or 4 egg yolks just to supplement. And
what do the brains do?
So the brains condition the hide. Actually, I'm going to go into that in just a second, but I want to just go over the ingredients list for the brain solution. So your brains, 1.5 gallons of hot water, not boiling hot. You want it to be hot enough that you can stick your hand in for about 5 or 10 seconds and it won't sting you. Because if it's too hot, you'll cook your hide. And you don't want to cook your hide. It's weird. And I use about 1/4 cup of some type of oil. I've used cow tallow, I've used bear fat, I've used olive oil, canola oil. It doesn't really matter, but the oil is just like an added conditioning agent.
How much oil?
1/4 cup for 1 hide. So, what does it mean? What do the brains do to the hide? The brains contain lecithins and fats. And it's the lecithins and the fats that penetrate the hide and condition it. And so all the hide are like all of these interwoven fibers that are really strongly woven together. And when this thing dries and it becomes rawhide, it's all the glues that are naturally found coating those membranes that stiffen and they harden. And so if you've seen like that sheath is like fairly close to rawhide. It has been brained, but it's still pretty stiff because I allowed the glues to settle. I didn't soften that part. And so what we're doing is we're forcing lecithins and fats from the brains into the hide to replace the natural glues. And that's why some people will use soap, like after they do this process, or before they membrane, they'll soak their hides in soap and like rub it down and wash it, because soaps take care of oils and glues. I don't do that because I find that it makes the hide slippery on the ringing beam. So, forcing brains in between the membranes, replacing the glues that naturally exist there. That's why we soften, because we're forcing these brains to take over while it's drying. And if you let it dry, the glues that are naturally there will settle, and they'll make it stiff. And that's fine, like often I've tanned hides that intentionally I don't put that much effort into because I know that hide would probably be good for bags instead of good for shorts or good for a shirt. So in just a few minutes I want to get into the ringing. So anybody else that wants to scrape, let's get it done in the next like 5 minutes, and there'll be more time later on if folks want to continue scraping.
So is braining to keep the hide soft?
The brains keep the hide soft. The brains condition the hide, and they essentially, they fill the hide with this like nice cush solution to make that hide soft. So it's really just like, it's like shampooing your hair. It's like a conditioning your hair. It's a conditioning agent for the hide. Yeah, I would move it up. So the brainings. That solution is ideally warm each time you stick your hide back into it. So I don't always do this. Actually, I don't often do this, but if I've got a fire going, I'll just put my hide solution back, in a pot, stick it over the fire for a little bit, and let it heat up before I stick the hide back in it. because what we're going to do is we're going to do about 3 or 4 brainings. You know, I've kind of narrowed it down to 2 because I feel I've done it and I've experimented with it and feel confident. But when I first started, I did 4 brainings. And so, what does that mean? What you're doing is you're soaking your hide in your brain solution and then you're wringing it out. And you're getting as much of the moisture out of it that you can without it getting crunchy. And so that's what that beam is for. And I'll, once everybody that wants to scrape now is done scraping, we'll take this hide over there and demonstrate wringing. And so you're wringing it out just like, you know, old-timers might their laundry or a towel. And that's to get the bulk of the moisture out of it. And in between brainings, I'll also essentially do part of the softening, where I'll even get it on the hide, and I'll work the rest of the moisture out of it, or I'll stretch it with the scraping tool. And I'll let it sit usually in the sun for like a half an hour in between brainings, because you're wanting to get most of the moisture, most of the water out of the hide to just leave brains, just leaving the lecithins and the fats in there. And then each time that you do that and you get the water out of it, you'll get better penetration of the brains on your next braining. Does that make sense to everybody?
And how many times do you brain it?
About 3 or 4 times. And so, you know, after this is done, oh, you know what? Y'all got me excited about, I got ahead of myself. There's one more step before braining. So, we'll get back to braining, but not too big of a detour. So, after this is all done, after this is all scraped, you're still left with one more layer, believe it or not, and that's the membrane layer. And the membrane, I'm going to grab my vet so y'all can kind of get a feel for what it's like.